You mentioned vinegar. I want to talk to you about this one because this is new to me. Tell us about why vinegar before a sugary dessert or a meal can flatten glucose levels, and that's been shown in studies as well.
It's because vinegar contains this magical molecule called acetic acid. And acetic acid communicates with your muscles, and it goes to your muscles and it tells them, hey, Rupees muscles, you need to soak up way more glucose than usual. You're really hungry for glucose. And the acetic acid essentially tells your muscles to do just that. If they feel any glucose coming into the bloodstream, they now are going to soak it up and store it as glycogen at a much higher rate than they normally would. So what happens is that you eat your sugary thing or you eat that meal, but if you have a tablespoon of vinegar in a tall glass of water before that meal, or you can even just add vinegar to the meal, for example, you have a much smaller glucose spike, but it's reduced by up to 30% without changing anything that you're eating. Just
Wow.
by adding something to the situation, you reduce the spike. So flattening your glucose levels is not about cutting things out or reducing what you eat. More often than not, it's about adding things to your diet,
Yeah, yeah,
which makes
yeah.
it fun. But it's really incredible the power of vinegar. And there are many clinical trials, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials on
Mm,
vinegar that show the impact on remission of type 2 diabetes, on polycystic ovarian syndrome symptoms. And just as we were saying about the starting with vegetables being something, traditional in Iran and in other countries, apple cider vinegar is something that everybody drinks every day, and grandmothers make it. It's like it's a very traditional thing to make. So how amazing that now we know that actually one of the ways it's helpful to us is in reducing the glucose spikes. It fascinates me. It's so cool.
yeah, no, that is really cool. And I'm just trying to think of other cuisines that might have that sort of vinegary element at the start of the meal. And what I've traditionally thought it was because of is because it enhances sort of your digestive enzymes and it
It
starts that whole
does.
process, which is, yeah, which kind of makes sense, like you're going to break down the molecules, you're going to activate your muscles, take on the glucose and convert it into glycogen. And so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just trying to think of like other examples of diets that might do this. And have you heard of Roshuku, the Japanese sort of order? I believe they have ferments at the start of the meal. Would that be the same thing, or is that slightly different?
That's different. So there's no acetic acid specifically in fermented foods, although
Mm,
vinegar is a fermented food. But eating fermented foods are really good for lots of other reasons, notably your
mm,
microbiome.
mm.
Tim Spector talks about this a lot, the lead scientist on this team at King's College, which is where I studied, that
Yeah.
study glucose levels, and they have a bunch of cool papers on this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, he's been on the pod a couple of months ago, and he's actually got me as a guinea pig for Zoe at the moment. I'm actually wearing
Nice. You
the
are a
CGM.
glucose monitor.
I'm doing another one at the moment as well. It's the Dexcom, just to
Yeah.
see what the difference is, and I'm calibrating it as well to make sure that it's accurate. And I think what I'm seeing is like the great trends, particularly for the next thing I was going to ask you about, which is postprandial exercise. So after eating, if I go for a walk, my glucose level is steady regardless of whatever I've eaten. It's pretty amazing to see that actually. And if I mean I'm using a standing desk at the moment, but if I eat something in the afternoon that has like some rice or I haven't done any of your order hacks, I certainly haven't had any vinegar or anything like that, I can see that rise. I see that bump in the middle of the day. Tell us about the postprandial exercise. I think this is super interesting. It's something that everyone could do.
Well, your muscles, every time they contract, they need energy to do it. And the first place they look for this energy is in glucose in your bloodstream. And so this is information that can really help us understand why it's useful, because after you eat a meal, you have two options. You either sit in your couch, the glucose from the meal makes it through your digestive system, then into your bloodstream, and big glucose spike. Then your body, with the help of insulin, brings that glucose back down. Or if after you eat, within an hour after the end of your meal, if you start using your muscles, so you can go for a walk, you can dance to your favorite song, you can do the dishes, you can fold your laundry, you can play with your kids, you can go do a really intense workout at the gym, whatever, your muscles, as they contract, will be soaking in the glucose from your bloodstream to be used for energy. And as a result, the spike is just naturally smaller. And what's really cool is that when you're exercising, your muscles do not need insulin to uptake glucose. So moving your body, using your muscles after eating, reduces the glucose and the insulin spike. Super powerful, especially powerful if you're somebody who suffers from being sleepy after your meals, which is often a side effect of the glucose crashing back down. It's really helped me completely get rid of that. So I'm no longer sleepy after my meals because I get up and I move for 10 minutes and then I feel great and energized, and I don't have that slump, and I don't have the cravings a couple hours after eating. Yeah. So that's another one of the hacks in Glucose Revolution. And it's easy stuff, and it really is life-changing.
Yeah, no, that's almost like the holy grail, isn't it? It's stable glucose with stable insulin levels as well. That's like the ultimate hack that we all need to sort of try and get into the habit of doing, right? Because the insulin,
because you know, one of the ways to keep your glucose levels down or steady is to inject a bunch of insulin, because the more insulin there is, the more your glucose will be put away into the storage units in your body. But the issue is, you know, doing that doesn't actually solve the problem. And over time, all this insulin leads to insulin resistance, which is the precursor to type 2 diabetes. So it's really important to think about hacks that lower your glucose levels while also lowering your insulin. And vinegar does this. Eating your food in the right order does this. Moving after you eat does this. And all the other hacks in my book also do this.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note that this isn't just for people who are at risk of type 2 diabetes or might have a metabolic inflexibility issue like PCOS, or, you know, this is for everyone, including type 1 diabetics, actually, obviously with the advice of a health professional and a nutritionist if you have one, because you need to be monitoring your insulin requirements. But reducing one's insulin requirements is a massive win. And I don't think we fully appreciate the ability to do this with some simple lifestyle hacks that you've just described here on the pod, and you also do in the book as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, for a long time, we thought that only people who had diabetes, so type 1 or type 2, had to worry about their glucose levels. But now we know, Rupi, that 90% of people without diabetes experience glucose spikes every day without knowing it, but while being very familiar with the consequences, the cravings and the fatigue and the needing to eat every 90 minutes, the poor sleep, the hormonal issues, the weight gain, the acne, the everything. So this is really a revolution in our understanding of health and of the importance of glucose. And that's who the book is for. The book is for anybody who doesn't wake up in the morning feeling amazing. It's for everybody, because keeping your glucose levels steady helps you in so many ways, physical and mental, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, there's been some criticism of CGM for non-diabetics in the past over the last couple of years, you know, some doctors on Twitter. And my response to that is, even though when I work in the NHS, we don't have access to these monitors for those who do not have type 2 diabetes, and it is kind of hard to get them even for those people as well. It's what you just described there. It's the understanding of why you're having these reactive hypoglycemic episodes that lead to a roller coaster of your emotions and how you're feeling in terms of your energy levels, that can also have impacts on you craving. And then in the context of an obesogenic environment, you're then grabbing whatever is in front of you, which unfortunately in our environment is a lot of sugary snacks, a lot of high salt
Absolutely.
snacks, a lot of things that are going to rapidly change your glucose levels, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And for those who don't have access to or can't afford glucose monitors because they're still quite expensive, or in the US need a prescription to get them, it's not like you can just buy them anywhere. The glucose hacks I share, you don't need a glucose monitor to use them. In fact, I would say maybe 98% of the people who are following my Glucose Goddess Instagram account, they don't have a glucose monitor. They're just using the hacks and starting to feel better very quickly, physically and mentally, without needing to monitor themselves. But I do think that wearing a glucose monitor is very interesting, very cool, and can help you reconnect with your body in a way. How has your experience been?
My experience has been really positive. I think I'm the kind of person that loves analytics, and I'm also the kind of person that won't get too anxious about it either. And I think I've described my experience to a few other people, including people who would not like and would not benefit from, say, like an Aura ring or some other sleep device, because they'd get pretty anxious in the mornings about how they haven't slept properly, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think it would be appropriate for those types of people, because it's almost a bit too much information and it can spiral into an unhealthy obsession with eating to maintain your glucose level. So I think for certain people, it would be brilliant. I actually think a CGM would be useful in short bouts, like for 7 days, to see what your response is like. And then maybe in the same way you would do a blood test every 6 or 12 months, you see what your metabolic flexibility is like on the basis of some of your lifestyle hacks. So when it comes to like encouraging people to adopt a lifestyle that's super healthy, I think it could be a really good thing to trial.
Absolutely. But definitely, if you're somebody who tends to, get quite disordered when it comes to tracking yourself. So whether it's weight, whether it's steps, like if you're that kind of person where this is triggering to you, don't use a glucose monitor, because it's giving you constant feedback every 30 seconds on what's happening.
Yeah.
And yes, for some people, it can be very overwhelming. I think as long as there's enough education around it, it's easy to understand what's happening. But what I see often is that people will try one and then they get very hung up on the exact numbers. They're like, oh, I was at 87. Now I'm at 84. Am I okay? Is this bad? Is this reactive hypoglycemia? So if you're going to wear a glucose monitor, read my book so you can get the context and not get too freaked out about small things and understand what actually matters. That's my recommendation, because I get a lot of messages from stressed out people and it breaks my heart because they're fine. Because there's very little education so far. People don't really know how to interpret the data. So really, and if you don't want to buy my book, that's fine. Just look on my Instagram and try to get a bit of context before you use it, just for your own sake, because I don't want you to be stressed out when you're probably totally fine.
I have the exact same sort of relationship with some of my followers as well, and people who listen via the pod and the newsletter and all the rest of it, because sometimes it can be really easy to get hung up on exactly every element of your lifestyle to try and optimize it. And if you're not doing that, am I bringing myself to harm? If I have a bit of sunflower oil, is this inflammatory? Is this going to lead me to have cancer? All these different things that you can understand to certain people would spiral into an unhealthy obsession. So I think that's really important. But I think you've done a really good job. Like I said right at the start of this pod, the fact that you've communicated the science really responsibly is super clear. And right at the start, you say, look, glucose isn't everything, because if you just eat for your glucose monitor, you'll just eat bacon all day long. That's not going to do anything to your glucose levels, but it's not going to be healthy. So I appreciate that. And I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Rupi. It's very important to me to, be as nuanced as I possibly can to explain that there's many other things in your life. Yes, glucose and keeping your glucose level steady will help you feel better, and it's going to heal a lot of stuff. But, sleep is important. Stress is important. Not eating unhealthy fat is important. Having human connections is important. Medical care is important. So many things also exist. And I don't want people to become, too focused on just glucose, especially while wearing glucose monitor, because as you mentioned, you can just eat bacon all day and have flat glucose levels, but that's not the answer. And in the hacks that I share, I'm very cautious about that. And the hacks will help you feel better, will help you flatten your glucose curves while avoiding those pitfalls. And that's very, very important.
Yeah. And looking at the evidence base behind what a flat glucose level can help you achieve, if whether you have symptoms or whether you're aware of them or not, I think is super interesting.